The wind did not sound like wind that morning. It sounded like someone dragging 1,000 frozen hands across the hills of western Wyoming. At 17, Clara Whitmore stood in the doorway of the old feed barn, holding a lantern that shook only because the wind kept pushing against it. The yellow light stretched across the dirt floor until it reached a line of fresh boot prints. They were not her uncle's. The prints were larger, heavier. Whoever had entered this barn had walked straight to the back wall, stood there for several minutes, then left before sunrise. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing looked broken. Yet every instinct Margaret Whitmore had taught Clara whispered the same warning. Someone had come looking for something they already believed existed. If you enjoy stories where ordinary people survive impossible winters through courage and quiet wisdom, stay with this one. What Clara discovers before this storm ends will change far more than her own life. She lowered the lantern. The sacks of grain remained stacked neatly. The harnesses still hung from their hooks. An old shovel leaned against the wall exactly where she had left it the evening before. Then she noticed the dust. One narrow shelf carried a clean rectangle where years of dust had been disturbed. Someone had lifted an object, looked through it, placed it back carefully enough that only a person who worked here every day would notice. Clara stared for several seconds. Then she covered the shelf with another grain sack. If someone returned, they would think she had seen nothing. She left the barn before dawn fully arrived. The farmhouse sat silent beneath a gray sky that promised trouble. Smoke drifted from the chimney, but it was thinner than usual. Even before she opened the back door, Clara knew something inside the house had already changed. Her uncle Elias Whitmore stood beside the kitchen table wearing his heavy winter coat, buttoned completely. His travel gloves already covered his hands. No farmer dressed like that before breakfast unless the decision had already been made. He looked at Clara without greeting her. "The farm can't carry another mouth through winter," he said. His voice carried no anger. Only calculation. Clara placed the water bucket beside the stove. She answered nothing. Years of living under his roof had taught her silence often revealed more than arguments. Elias slid a worn canvas pack across the table. Inside rested one blanket, a loaf of hard bread, a small piece of smoked venison, and the hunting knife that had belonged to her father. "You'll head toward Dry Creek. You'll find work somewhere." His eyes never stayed on hers for long. Instead, they drifted toward the back hallway where another man's shadow briefly crossed the wall. Someone else had spent the night inside this house. Someone Clara had never met. She remembered the strange footprints inside the feed barn, the disturbed shelf, the hidden visitor. The pieces fit together too easily. Without another word, she lifted the pack onto her shoulders. As she reached the front porch, she heard the stranger speak quietly behind the hallway door. "She won't make it before the storm," another voice answered. "It won't matter by tomorrow." The words froze harder than the December air. Clara kept walking. She never looked back. The road stretched 12 lonely miles across open Wyoming ranchland. The clouds above rolled lower with every passing minute. Snowflakes began falling almost without sound. At first they looked harmless. Tiny white feathers drifting across empty fields. Margaret had once warned her about storms like these. The quiet ones bury people. Clara pulled her scarf tighter. Walking meant warmth. Standing still meant surrender. She focused only on the next step, then the next. By late morning, the wind had strengthened. Fence posts disappeared behind blowing snow. Old wagon tracks vanished beneath fresh drifts. The world slowly erased itself. Her boots pushed deeper with every mile. The left one finally soaked through while crossing a frozen creek. Cold water wrapped around her foot like iron. She did not stop. Stopping invited the cold inside. Movement kept it waiting outside a little longer. Around noon, she heard wagon wheels approaching behind her. She stepped aside. Deputy Samuel Briggs slowed his county wagon beside the road. He studied her. The pack, the storm, the empty road ahead. "You're heading toward Dry Creek?" "Yes." He looked toward the dark western sky. "You picked a hard day." She waited. Part of her believed he would offer a ride. Instead, he tightened the reins. "Keep moving. The wagon rolled away. Within seconds, it disappeared behind blowing snow. Clara watched until it vanished completely. She finally understood something important. No one was coming. Not today. Maybe not ever. The realization settled inside her without panic. It simply became another fact she would have to survive. The storm grew stronger. Snow no longer drifted. It attacked. Wind shoved against her shoulders until every step demanded effort. Visibility shrank to only a few yards. Even breathing became work. She climbed a low ridge searching for protection. Nothing. Only scattered pine trees bending beneath the wind. Then she noticed something strange. Halfway up the hillside stood a patch where snow refused to settle evenly. The shape beneath it looked too smooth, too straight. Nature rarely built perfect lines. Curiosity pulled her closer. She brushed snow away with frozen hands. Wood appeared beneath the ice. An old door, almost completely buried beneath the hillside itself. Her heartbeat quickened. Someone had built this. Long ago. She cleared more snow. Then she stopped. The ground directly in front of the door had already been shoveled recently. Fresh snow covered it now, but not enough to hide the flat surface underneath. Someone else had stood here, very recently, not weeks ago, not months ago, days, maybe even yesterday. The wind slammed into her back so hard she nearly fell. She grabbed the iron handle. It burned against her skin through her gloves. For one long second she hesitated. If someone lived inside, opening the door could be the biggest mistake of her life. Another blast of frozen wind struck her soaked boot. Decision disappeared. Instinct took over. She pulled the handle with both hands. The old door groaned inward. A breath of still earth drifted out. Not warm, but alive. Clara lifted her lantern toward the darkness below. Stone steps disappeared into the hill, and somewhere beneath the earth, something waited. Stone walls swallowed the sound of the blizzard the moment the heavy door closed. The roaring wind faded into a dull murmur somewhere above Clara's head. She stood motionless on the last stone step, holding the lantern higher while her breathing slowly settled. The room before her was much larger than she expected. Its ceiling curved into thick timber beams blackened by age. Strong stone walls wrapped around every side. Nothing here looked abandoned. Everything looked prepared. Shelves lined one wall from floor to ceiling. Glass jars filled with beans, carrots, dried apples, and preserved meat stood in careful rows. Bundles of herbs hung from wooden pegs. Firewood had been stacked beneath an oilcloth to keep every piece dry. Near the center of the room stood a small cast-iron stove. Cold, but ready. Whoever built this place had planned every detail. Clara set her pack beside the stove. Before touching anything else, she walked slowly through the room. Margaret had always taught her one rule. When you enter another person's shelter, look before you live. She studied the shelves. Nothing appeared disturbed. Then her eyes stopped on a tin cup resting beside the stove. Dark coffee stains still clung to the bottom. Not old stains. Fresh enough that the smell still lingered faintly inside. Someone had been here recently. The same thought struck her again. The footsteps. The disturbed shelf. The stranger inside her uncle's house. Now this hidden shelter. None of it felt like chance anymore. She knelt beside the stove. Dry cedar kindling waited neatly inside a wooden crate. She built the smallest fire possible, not because she feared running out of wood, because she did not yet know whose wood it was. The flame slowly caught. Orange light spread across the stone walls. Warmth reached her frozen hands first, then her soaked left foot. Pain rushed through her toes so sharply she closed her eyes until it passed. That pain told her something important. The foot was still alive. She removed the wet boot and wrapped her foot inside her spare shirt while the leather dried beside the stove. Only then did she allow herself to eat. One piece of bread, half a strip of smoked venison, no more. This shelter had given her another night. Tomorrow had not been promised. While looking for extra blankets, Clara noticed a narrow wooden chest beneath the bunk. It was wrapped in faded canvas. Unlike everything else, almost no dust covered it. She crouched beside it. Someone had opened this chest not very long ago. She lifted the lid. Inside rested a leather journal. Nothing else. She carefully opened the first page. The handwriting was steady and clean. Property Journal of Nathan Holloway. Winter, 1872. The pages were filled with practical notes. Outside temperature. Firewood counts. Food supplies. Snow depth. Repairs made to the roof. Every page belonged to a man who believed careful records kept people alive. Clara smiled quietly. Margaret would have liked him. She turned several pages, then stopped. Nearly 20 pages had been removed with a sharp blade. Not torn. Cut cleanly. Someone had wanted those pages gone. Very recently. The paper around the cuts remained pale. Too pale for damage done years ago. She continued reading beyond the missing section. Near the bottom of one page, written with different handwriting, 4 words caught her attention. He refused every offer. She read them again. Not Nathan's writing. Someone else's. Someone who had opened this journal after Nathan was gone. The room suddenly felt much smaller. Clara wrapped the journal back inside its cloth. Instead of hiding it, she placed it beside her blanket where she could reach it quickly if necessary. The fire crackled softly. Outside, snow hammered against the buried door. Hours passed. Darkness settled completely beyond the hill. She almost drifted asleep when something interrupted the silence. A sound, not inside the shelter. Above it. Crunch. Crunch. Snow compressed beneath heavy boots. One person. Number 2. The footsteps stopped directly above the buried entrance. Clara instantly covered the lantern with a folded cloth. The room dimmed. She stood without making a sound. Every heartbeat seemed loud enough to betray her. The footsteps remained still. Then came the scrape of metal. Someone outside was pushing snow away from the door. Her fingers tightened around her father's hunting knife. The iron latch moved slightly. Whoever stood outside knew exactly where the hidden entrance was. The door shook once. Then again. A man's voice came through the wood. Low, calm. Search carefully. Another answered from farther uphill. He said the girl won't survive long. Clara's breathing stopped. They were not searching for shelter. They were searching for her. She stepped backward without making a sound. The stove still glowed faintly. Too much light. Too much smoke. Too much evidence. Working quickly, she closed the stove damper until the fire settled into dark red coals. The room grew colder, but almost invisible. Outside, the first man spoke again. If she found this place. He paused, then finished the sentence that turned Clara's blood cold. Mr. Whitmore said we burn it before sunrise. The words above the door faded into silence. No one touched the handle again. For several long moments, Clara heard only the storm pushing snow against the hillside. Then another voice spoke. Older. Impatient. We're wasting time. The drift will cover it again before daylight. The first man answered quietly. We search once more tomorrow. Their footsteps slowly disappeared into the blizzard. Clara remained exactly where she stood. She counted slowly to 100, then another 100. Only after complete silence returned did she uncover the lantern. Its small flame revealed the room again. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. Her uncle had not simply sent her away. Someone had expected her to find this place, and someone had been ordered to erase it forever. She walked back to the wooden chest. This time she searched every corner carefully. Nathan Holloway had built this shelter too precisely to leave only one journal behind. She examined the shelves, tapped the stone walls, lifted empty crates. Nothing. Then she noticed something unusual beside the lowest shelf. One stone carried faint scratches, not random marks, repeated wear, as though hands had pressed against that exact spot many times over the years. She pushed. Nothing happened. She pressed harder. A dull click echoed inside the wall. Part of the shelf slowly shifted outward. Hidden behind it rested a narrow compartment no wider than her arm. Inside lay a folded oilcloth package tied with leather cord. Her heartbeat quickened. She carried it carefully to the table. Inside she found 3 items. The first was a rolled property survey. The second was an iron key. Old, heavy, handmade. The third was a sealed letter. Across the front, Nathan had written only 4 words. For the honest finder. Clara hesitated before opening it. The paper inside had yellowed with age, yet the writing remained clear. Nathan explained why he had built the shelter. Years earlier, an unusually cruel winter had buried entire ranches across the valley. Neighbors died within sight of their own homes because no protected shelter existed. Nathan swore no family would face another winter without hope. So he built this place beneath the hill, quietly, patiently, almost entirely alone. But the next paragraph made Clara sit perfectly still. Nathan wrote that several wealthy landowners had tried to buy the hill after learning about the shelter. He refused every offer. One name appeared more than once. Edwin Whitmore. Clara stared at it. Whitmore, her own family name. Her uncle had never mentioned another Whitmore owning land here. She continued reading. Nathan believed Edwin wanted the shelter destroyed because whoever controlled it could eventually control the valley during hard winters. The final lines were written much darker than the rest. If anyone reads this after my death, trust no Whitmore who comes asking for this hill. The fire cracked softly beside her. Clara lowered the letter. Questions crowded her mind faster than answers could form. Who was Edwin? Why had Elias hidden him from her? And why had strangers searched her uncle's barn only yesterday? Before she could think further, another sound reached her ears. Not outside. Inside. A faint drip. Water. She followed it toward the rear wall. Behind stacked barrels, she found a narrow passage leading deeper into the hill. Cold air drifted through it. Fresh air. The tunnel continued farther underground. Nathan had built more than one room. Lantern raised high. Clara stepped forward carefully. The passage curved through solid stone. Old support beams still stood firm. After nearly 50 feet, the tunnel opened into another chamber. Smaller, cleaner, untouched. Against one wall rested shelves filled with mining tools. Pickaxes, shovels, lanterns. Coiled rope. Near the center stood a heavy wooden table covered by a faded canvas cloth. She pulled it back. A detailed hand-drawn map spread across the surface. Every trail, every ridge, every creek, every abandoned cabin across western Wyoming had been carefully marked. Several locations carried red circles. One circle surrounded this very shelter. Another rested far north in the mountains. A third marked an old trading post near Dry Creek. Nathan had built more than one refuge. He had created an entire network, a place where travelers could survive when winter turned deadly. Clara traced the map with one finger. Then she noticed fresh candle wax on one corner. White, still clean, not yellow with age. Someone had stood here recently studying this same map. The realization tightened every muscle in her body. The strangers already knew about the network. Maybe they knew every shelter. Maybe they were hunting all of them. A sudden pounding echoed through the tunnel, not from the front entrance. From somewhere beyond the deeper chamber, 3 slow knocks, then silence. Clara froze. Nathan's map remained beneath her hand. The lantern flame trembled. Again. 3 deliberate knocks. Someone else knew another way into the shelter, and whoever stood beyond that hidden passage had just announced they were coming inside. The lantern shook slightly in Clara's hand. The 3 knocks came again. Slow, evenly spaced. Not the pounding of someone trapped outside. Not the desperate blows of a person freezing in the storm. Whoever stood beyond the hidden passage wanted the person inside to know they were waiting. Clara lowered the flame until only a faint glow remained. She remembered something Margaret had once said. The first person who speaks gives away more than the one who stays quiet. So she waited. The silence stretched. Then an old man's voice drifted through the stone. If you're hiding from the storm, you're welcome. If you're hiding from men, open carefully. Clara tightened her grip on the lantern. Who are you? My name is Caleb Mercer. I helped build this place. Her heart skipped. Nathan Holloway had never written another builder's name inside the journal. She stepped toward the hidden door but stopped before unlatching it. How do I know you're telling the truth? The old man answered without hesitation. Behind your stove there's a loose stone. Inside you'll find the first silver dollar Nathan earned hauling timber. He never spent it. He called it the foundation of the shelter. Clara hurried back into the first room. She knelt beside the stove. One stone shifted easily beneath her fingers. Inside rested a tarnished silver dollar. Exactly where the stranger had said. She returned to the hidden passage. Slowly, she lifted the wooden bar. The narrow door opened inward. An elderly man stood there, wrapped in snow-covered buffalo hide. His white beard carried frozen ice. Behind him waited a mule pulling a small sled loaded with sacks of flour, blankets, and firewood. The old man smiled faintly. Nathan always believed someone worthy would find this place. You must be that person. Caleb entered quietly. He warmed his hands over the stove before speaking again. Nathan saved my family during the winter of '72. When he grew older, I promised I'd check this shelter every winter. I came yesterday. But I saw strangers searching the ridge. I stayed hidden. Clara showed him the letter, the property survey, the iron key. Caleb studied each carefully. Then his face hardened. So Elias finally found the hill. You know my uncle? I've known him since he was younger than you. Caleb looked into the fire. He wasn't always like this. But money changes some people. When the railroad announced it would pass through Dry Creek, land prices began climbing. Elias learned this hill held more than shelter. He learned surveyors believed valuable coal rested beneath these slopes. Clara understood immediately. The shelter had never been the only prize. Owning the hill meant owning everything beneath it. Caleb unfolded Nathan's map. His weathered finger stopped at one location near Dry Creek. The key belongs here. There is a courthouse lockbox. Nathan placed the original deed there with Judge Warren 20 years ago. If that deed still exists, nobody can steal this land. Outside, the blizzard had finally begun losing its strength. Gray daylight filtered through the buried entrance. By afternoon, Deputy Samuel Briggs appeared at the shelter door. This time he came alone. He removed his hat before speaking. I made a mistake leaving you on that road. I've come to fix what I can. Clara handed him Nathan's letter. Then the survey. Then the property papers Caleb had helped protect for decades. The deputy read every page twice. His expression changed with each document. Finally, he folded them carefully. I'll take these directly to the county judge. No one else touches them. 3 days later, Clara stood inside the small courthouse at Dry Creek. Judge Warren unlocked an old iron box using Nathan's heavy key. Inside rested the original deed exactly where Nathan had promised. The signatures matched. The survey matched. Every record agreed. Nathan Holloway had legally transferred the shelter to the first honest caretaker who preserved it for the people of the valley. That caretaker was now Clara Whitmore. When Elias arrived with his lawyer, the judge quietly laid every document across the desk. No raised voices, no long speeches, only facts. Elias read the papers. His shoulders slowly dropped. For the first time, he had nothing left to argue. Weeks later, spring sunlight reached the hillside. The buried shelter no longer belonged to one frightened girl. Farmers repaired its roof. Carpenters strengthened its beams. Families replaced every jar that had been opened during the storm. Deputy Briggs organized emergency supply wagons. Caleb taught young ranchers how to maintain the hidden tunnels. The shelter became something Nathan had always hoped it would become, not a secret kept for profit. A place that stayed ready for whoever needed another chance. One evening, Clara stood outside the old wooden door, watching snow melt into small streams running down the hillside. The valley below was alive again. Smoke rose peacefully from distant chimneys. Children laughed near wagons returning to town. She placed Nathan's silver dollar back inside the loose stone beside the stove, exactly where he had left it. Some things were never meant to be owned, only protected. And somewhere beneath the quiet Wyoming hill, the fire burned steadily, waiting for the next winter that would one day come. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves powerful American frontier survival stories.